Welcome, friends, to Life's Worth Living Foundation's podcast. I'm your host, Jon Gossett. Tonight's podcast is brought to you by GTM Builders, Tooele County's premier home builder. We're lucky to have a home in their model home in Overlake. So again, big shout out to GTM Builders for making this possible. So, in this podcast, we're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to be talking about life struggles. We're going to be talking about mental health, and we're going to be talking about people that have been handed extreme challenges in this life and how they've overcome. I think that as we sit and visit, we're going to learn a lot from different guests that I plan to have on this. You know, one of the things that I learned in working in prevention is that my circle of friends has just grown tremendously. As I've sat back and I've been able to meet these people that are doing other things in prevention, I've realized that there's a lot of amazing people out there, and I plan on sharing this group of friends with you through this podcast so that we can learn from each other. I'm really excited about it. So first, I want to introduce myself. I'm Jon Gossett. I am the president and founder of Life's Worth Living Foundation, based here in Utah. We're a 501c3 nonprofit in suicide prevention. I founded this foundation 6 years ago. I can't believe it. 6 years ago this exact weekend. And I want to kind of take you back in time on this podcast, on this premiere podcast tonight, and kind of tell you what the last 6 years has been like for me. And moving forward, we'll be bringing guests on this show, and we'll be able to interview and find out what makes those people tick. And so I'm really excited about it. So if I were to go back 6 years, back to February of 2014, back when it all began, I'm a contractor, and that's what I do by trade. And every February we would go down to St. George, Utah for the Parade of Homes. While we were down there, we ended up getting word that a young man that wrestled with my son at Tooele High School had passed away. He had died by suicide. And I think we found that out on a Friday morning. And on Saturday, the very next day, we received word that one of my really good friends, his son, had died by suicide also. So we ended up having 2 suicides in 2 days. And that was pretty tough to take. And so we came back from St. George on a Sunday evening. And we got back and really sat and thought about the things that we had kind of been given that week. And it was really tough to take. And so as we sat and pondered about it over the next couple of weeks, we decided something needed to be done, that we needed to do something to make a difference where we live. My friend's daughter, Becca, said, gosh, she was talking about the struggles and losing her brother and some of the things that she was going through. And I said, well, let's take a bad thing and let's make something good of it. And so we sat down together and decided about bringing forth this foundation to try to help our community heal. And, I sat and I thought about it. I thought, I wonder, why me? Why is this something that I feel passionate about, something that I feel like I need to make a difference in? And, the stories and the things as I review those last 6 years, some of those things that we've had to deal with and we've had to hear about have been really challenging and sad. And I think one of the things that has been so great about it is I'm not a person that struggles with highs or lows. I'm in a pretty good mood all the time. And I think that maybe this is why me? Maybe this is why this has kind of been handed to me as something that I need to do. I've had a lot of people ask me, what made you think that you could start a nonprofit? What made you think that you would even know what to do with a nonprofit? And I've kind of laughed about it and said, I've been a small business owner my whole life, trying to run a for-profit company. And if there's one thing that I figured out, I'm not very good at making a profit, and so why not do a nonprofit? And so I set out with the state of Utah and filed for my 501c3. That was in February of 2014. And from everything of thinking of the name of the foundation, Life's Worth Living Foundation, all the way to our mission. And we have a threefold mission: to raise awareness, to educate, and to prevent suicides. And everything's kind of just fallen in my lap. These have been things that I kind of feel like they've kind of been a gift from above, and I've been guided in knowing what to do. Now, trust me, we've made a lot of mistakes. We've made a lot of things have been harder for us because I haven't known exactly what to do. But the one thing that I found out very early on was in prevention. You think in prevention, everybody works together. Everybody is doing this to try to make a difference. In every different form of nonprofits and government agencies, everybody's just doing the best they can to make a difference. And yet there is still territorialism. There's still we do this better and you must not know what you're doing. And why would we want what you're offering? Because we do that too. And there is some overlap. And that was one of the challenges we faced early on. And, I remember being really bothered by it. Why were people not taking me serious for what we wanted to do? And as we continued to progress and keep pushing through, the one thing that I knew was I'm a hard worker, and I knew that we could outwork about anybody if we just put our mind to it and tried to do the best we could. And that's kind of been the key to our success. And, 6 years later, we have got some great community partners. We've got people that we work with on a daily basis. And I feel like together we're better than we were alone. And I really believe that that has been the key to the success in the area where I live, in our community, in our area, even in our state, is the fact that we're all working together. And for that, I'm really grateful. Talk about some milestones that you'll probably learn about in an upcoming podcast. Some of the things that I would say that we have done really, really well and things that we've brought about is, I've always had a theory of go big or go home. I know that it's something that we just have to do. And in going big or going home, we've come up with some things that have really made a difference. We're really excited. Here it is February, and we're already planning on our annual walk to Wendover. This is not just your normal walk. This is 100 miles across the Salt Flats by the Great Salt Lake, from Tooele City Hall all the way across Tooele County to Wendover, West Wendover, Nevada. It's a 100-mile walk. We do it over multiple days. It happens to be the longest walk for suicide prevention in the nation. Really proud of it. We started out with 20 people and a crazy idea. And we ended up taking a couple of 15-passenger vans, and we made our way across the Salt Flats. And took us 2 days. It's about 24 hours worth of walking, and we rocked it out with 20 people. The very next year, we doubled that to 50. The very next year, we took it to 125 walkers, and this year, we're taking 4 tour buses and hopefully between 200 and 250 walkers on our way to Wendover. This has probably become our biggest fundraiser. It's probably become our one of the things we're most well known for. Every year we get major sponsors that want to be a part of this walk, have their name associated with it. That mentality of go big or go home is something that I'm really proud of. I mean, this is an undertaking that not very many people, I think, would try. I'm just dumb enough to try it, so I'm really happy with this walk. Another thing that we did was in 2018, we were involved up at the state capitol in Utah, and we were talking about veteran suicide, the problem that we have in our country with veteran suicide. We're losing 22 vets a day. 22 vets a day. You think about that, and it's stunning to think that many of America's finest have succumb to their struggles. And I think that's really a sad state of affairs. We need to take better care of our men and women in the military. I was raised an Army brat. I grew up with a very patriotic family. And you know what? It's something that we owe this country. We owe our men and women. And so as we were up there at the state capitol, we were watching a documentary called Thank You for Your Service. That documentary was really tough to watch, really, as they tracked this group of soldiers from the Middle East that had been in Baghdad and done these things. To watch the struggles that they went through and the hardships that they faced was really intense. Like I said, difficult to watch at times. But they said something in that documentary that has stayed with me to this day. In the Vietnam War, while it was an unpopular war, we lost 58,220 soldiers to combat death. 58,000 is staggering. That's just way more than you would even want to think about. 58,000. For those of you that have been to the Vietnam Wall, here in Utah, we have a replica of that Vietnam Wall up in Layton, Utah. You stand there and you look at those numbers, or those names on that wall, and you just can't fathom to think how many names. 58,220. What's even way worse than that, and I think something that I still can't wrap my head around, is the fact that since the Vietnam War, since the end of that war, of those same Vietnam soldiers, we have lost 170,000 to suicide. So, that's nearly 3 to 1. 3 suicides for every combat death. And as I sit and I have the opportunity to work with the DAV and the VFW here where I live, as I look at those incredible men that went halfway around this world to fight a war for their country, to think that we are losing them at that rate. Now, here's the interesting thing. If it's an overdose death and they haven't left a note, they won't go down as a suicide. They'll go down as an accidental overdose. So the VA actually understands that number 22 might not be accurate. There might be a lot higher than we even know. But 22 is a number that we work with. So as we left the Capitol that night as a foundation, following that documentary, we still had that number kind of rolling around in our mind, like how are we losing 22 a day? How have we lost 170,000 of those men and women to suicide? And yet, an example I use all the time when we talk about suicides is it would be about the same as loading up a 737 and watching it crash every day. If that were happening in an airplane, what would we do? Those flights would be grounded. This last year we saw the 737 MAX had a couple of crashes, and they halted all flights of 737s, grounded the entire fleet, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And yet we're losing that kind of numbers, losing someone to suicide every 40 seconds in this country. And yet we're not doing anything about it, nothing to really make a change in those numbers the way we need to. So as we came back from that documentary that night, we sat around and we thought, what can we do? And one thing that we had heard about was that they were going to do a monument in Washington, D.C. that was dedicated to veteran suicide. They were going to do that a few years back, and the sculptor that they had chosen and kind of the plan that they were undertaking was to do a 25-foot granite table, kind of like a kitchen table like I'm sitting at, but a long, rectangular, 25-foot granite kitchen table. On top of that table, there was going to be a bottle of Jim Beam. There was also going to be some pill bottles, prescription pill bottles. One of them was going to be spilled over with pills on that tabletop. And there was going to be a revolver laying on that table. And one of the chairs were going to be backed away from that table. And I thought to myself, the service that those men and women have given our country, we owe them a debt of gratitude. But you know what we really owe them? We really owe those men and women to actually think about their dedication in their lives and the things that they've done for all of us, and to remember the lives they've lived and the service they've given, not just remember the last few minutes of their life. And that's what that sculpture was going to do. And so we decided as a foundation, you know what? Before they're able to do that or anything else, we're going to go ahead and we are going to unveil a statue. Happened to be here in the town that I live in, Tooele, Utah, where we have Dugway Proving Grounds and Tooele Army Depot, and we have a military history here in this county that's phenomenal. We decided we were going to unveil a statue dedicated to addressing veteran suicide. But not just addressing veteran suicide, not just telling you about it, but actually to unveil a statue that would connect those struggling veterans with resources locally that they may not know about, that could actually help them in overcoming the PTSD and the things that they're going through, so that they can lead a successful life after their life in the military. And so we set out, I think it was in 2017, September of 2017, when we were up at the Capitol. We actually planned from September to December how we were going to do this, picked an artist, picked a sculpture, and decided we were going to raise money for it. We started January 1st of 2018 raising money for this statue. And I'm proud to say that on Veterans Day in 2018, as a foundation, we unveiled the nation's first bronze monument dedicated to connecting those struggling veterans with resources. It's an 18-foot bronze statue in our Veterans Memorial Park here in Tooele, Utah, and it's 18 feet tall, and it has been valued at $250,000, and we actually were able to get the donations to make that possible, and we unveiled that Veterans Day of 2018, and I'll tell you, it was a proud day, probably the proudest day I've ever had in my life, to know that we made that big of a difference, and that our park was just packed. I mean, we had 300-400 people sitting, and the rest of the park was standing room only. And so we're talking about some of the milestones with Life's Worth Living Foundation. There's been many, and we've been able to be honored for the work that we've done. Been able to be honored for achievements that we've made and things that we've done. But you know what? We're not going to rest on those. We're going to continue to do. And so I want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the differences we've seen since the inception of the foundation in 2014. So if we can go back 6 years ago, let me tell you where we were. In Utah was ranked 5th in the nation for suicide. We were 5th, and we've always been in the top 10. 5th is pretty high. It's nothing we want to be proud of. 5th out of 50 states. So in 2014, we are 5th. Proud to say that this last year we have slid one position into 6th. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but we are moving in the right direction. Now, as for Tooele County, in 2014, we were 4th in the state. Our county was the 4th highest suicides in the state. 4th out of 29 counties. We have actually dropped from 2014 till now from 4th to 21st. And that's something I'm very proud of because, again, not taking the credit for it as a foundation, but I know that we play a part with our community partners. All of us have got this common push. We're training people. We're doing what we can. We're in the schools. We're in the community. We're in the businesses, in the churches. We are doing whatever it takes to make a difference. And together, that's what we've done. This last, I guess it was a couple of years ago, we do what's called the SHARP study in the schools. And we were the only school district in the state of Utah that saw a decrease in suicide ideation. Statewide, the only school district. Now, we've got school districts all over the place. Our state's over 3 million residents, And our school district in rural Utah, a bedroom community of Salt Lake City, saw a decrease while the others had an increase. So that's something we're really, really proud of. One of the things that I think makes the foundation really effective is the fact that, we just look for a need. And if we see a need, we're going to fill it. We're going to do what we can to make a difference. We've done that in the last year with the LGBT group, trying to make a group for them where they can feel safe and cared about. We've got a veteran support group, a regular support group at the hospital for just community members. We are doing whatever it takes. We train in Talk Saves Lives, QPR, Safe Talk, and we are just becoming, as a foundation, trained in Working Minds, which is made for the workplace. And so, we just look for a need and how to fill it, and then that's what we do. So, I'm really, really happy where we're at. I've been thinking about this podcast for over a year, how I was going to make sure that we brought this about. And as I've sat back for a year planning in the planning stages of saying, how are we going to make this happen? What's been really interesting to me is I've put together a list of guests that I plan to have sitting right here at this table with me, talking about what they are doing or what they've gone through or where they've been and where they're at now. I've got a list of over 60 people that have agreed to come on this podcast, and I think it's going to be amazing as I introduce these friends to you and share their stories with you because, 7 years ago, I think if somebody had told me, hey, Jon, you're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort in suicide prevention, you're going to dedicate that part of your life to trying to make a difference, I would have told them they were crazy. I had no intention on ever spending this much time doing this. And, I'm glad I did. And I sit and I think about where we're at today in this world, and I sit and I look at these youth, and not only the youth, the military, our seniors, and I sit back and I think this is going to be the struggle of our generation. This is something that has got to be addressed. This has got to be something that we actually look at and figure out how we're going to make a difference. How are we going to prevent suicides? I look back to when I was a kid, and when I was in school, I didn't know anybody that had taken their life by suicide. I didn't know one person in my junior high or high school. And as I go into schools now, it seems to be the majority of the kids have been affected in some way. They've lost somebody that they cared about. They know somebody that's died by suicide. So there's been a shift in our culture. There's been a change that, I just can't, entirely put my finger on. And, as I've sat back and talked to even the generation prior to me, my parents, my grandparents, there's definitely been a shift and there's been a change. And I guess I just sit back and, I'd like you to kind of think about that. What's changed? What's the difference? What do you think has happened over our lifetime that has made this change to where we're starting to see the suicides just increase and increase? What do you think can be done to turn the tide? I mean, these are questions I'd like you to just kind of mull over. I'd like to know your thoughts on it. I would like to get to know all of you better as we progress through these podcasts. So, 6 years ago, I didn't think enough was being done in prevention. I felt like we were losing the youth at an extreme rate. And I was sad to sit back and think that nothing was being done. Now, over the last 6 years, I've learned a lot. And what I've learned is I didn't know very much going into this. I literally knew nothing. And there was a lot being done. There was a lot of things being done that I didn't recognize because I wasn't in the trenches. But now I'm in the trenches. I can tell you, I've met some extraordinary people. Some people that no doubt have made a huge difference, saved many lives. And I'm proud to call those people my friends, and quite honestly, they have been one of the greatest blessings in my life, and it seems like that circle of friends that I have just keeps getting larger and larger as I continue in this field, and I'm really excited about this podcast. I'm glad that you're going to be tagging along with me, and I'm going to be so excited to introduce these people to you and let you hear from them, their thoughts and what they've gone through. So I hope you're going to hang with us. I hope that you're going to learn something. I hope that you'll be touched. And so I guess in closing, again, I want to give a big shout out to GTM Builders. GTM has opened up this model home to us and told us to make it the home of this podcast. And for that, I'll be grateful forever. To have a place that's beautiful like this, that I can bring guests and we can sit in the quiet and be able to discuss these things. So again, if you're looking for a new home, come out to Tooele County. I think they have 4 model homes out here, that they are really the biggest builder in Tooele County. Not only the biggest, but you know what? They're good people. So I appreciate GTM Builders for making this possible again. And I hope that through this podcast, you're going to find hope and healing in your lives. For whatever reason that this subject matter touches you, that you want to be part of watching this podcast, you know what? Thank you. I promise we're going to get better at it. It's really uncomfortable to be in front of a camera. It's uncomfortable to be in front of a mic, and there's no fixing the screw-ups when you make them. So I appreciate you being patient as I learn and as we go through this together. One thing that you can do for me is please hit the subscribe button, rate and review this podcast. That helps us out so much, makes this visible to so many other people. Also, if you would please share this with your friends. You obviously know those people that this podcast can touch, and sharing it and getting the word out so that people are able to watch this and be able to learn from my guests as they come on here. They're probably not going to learn much from me, but to learn from my guests as we share this podcast and release new episodes, that would mean the world to me. Now, I want to know your thoughts. I want to know what you guys are looking for in this podcast. So I hope you'll reach out to me. Reach out to me at lifesworthlivingfoundation@gmail.com. Send me your thoughts. Send me your ideas. I'll try to make them happen. And we are going to go ahead and push through. The one thing that frustrates me the most about podcasts is I find one and I think this is something really interesting. Then they quit doing the podcast. I don't plan on it. We've got 60 guests. I think those 60 guests are going to be phenomenal. So hang tight. As you subscribe to this, you're going to be alerted to when new episodes drop. And I hope you'll watch and listen to them. And I hope you get something out of them. And I want you to keep current with Life's Worth Living Foundation, what we're doing locally. What are we doing to make a difference in our community? What events do we have? If you're local, or if you're not, if you're states away or in another country, I just hope that you will continue to watch what we are doing as a foundation. You can find us on whatever platform of social media that you prefer. Look for us, Life's Worth Living Foundation. And again, guys, I'm your host, Jon Gossett. Thanks for being here. Now, I'm not sure what brought us together, but you know what? I love you, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you.